Coffee on the floor, a torn grocery bag, and a sentence so cold I swear my heart stopped. I'm tired of seeing you every day. That's how my son ended 30 years of fatherhood, not with shouting, not with tears, but with a calm voice that sounded like the end of something solid. Behind him, Lena stood with her arms folded, a faint, rehearsed smile on her face. The kind of smile people wear after signing the last page of a plan. It sounded like a small thing, but that sentence was the quiet explosion I never heard coming. And it would end with a for sale sign planted on the same lawn I used to mow every Sunday morning. My name's Earl Thompson, 68, Army mechanic retired. I've kept engines alive in sandstorms and under shell fire. I've patched fuel lines with chewing gum and prayer. But no one ever taught me how to keep a family from falling apart. I thought I'd seen every kind of war until I heard a door close behind me one morning in Salem, Oregon, and realized the last battlefield of my life was the house I built with my own hands. Before I tell you what really happened after that day, tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe silence can be the loudest answer, hit like and subscribe. That morning, the Salem sky was clear as glass. I'd just come back from the market, groceries still warm from the cashier's hand. The second I stepped inside, Ryan said it, not loud, not angry, just cold. I'm tired of seeing you every day. I stopped mid-step. At first I thought he was joking. He used to tease me, "Dad, you always buy too many tomatoes." But this time there was no grin, just a long silence. And behind him, Lena, arms crossed, eyes sharp, like she was there to make sure he didn't back down. "What did you say, son?" He looked down, then exhaled as if the words had been waiting behind his teeth for months. I said, "I need space. It's too much. Every day it's too much." The clock on the wall ticked once, then twice. And in those small ticks, something cracked, not the house, not the bag in my hand, but trust. Lena stepped in, voice smooth, polite, prepared. "It's not healthy for him to depend on you, Earl. He's a grown man now. We just need our own life. Our own life." Funny how people talk like they're applying for one. I almost laughed, but nothing came out. I just looked around. The walls I painted myself. The window hinges I fixed when Nancy was still alive. Every inch of this house had a memory welded into it. When Ryan married Lena, I moved into the small room at the end of the hall, gave them space. Still paid the property taxes. Still fixed the roof when it leaked. Still kept the lights on. I thought that's what fathers did, stay useful. Turns out I'd just become part of the furniture. "So you're saying, you want me gone?" Ryan didn't answer. Lena shrugged, calm as ever. "We think it'd be best if you found your own place. Somewhere peaceful. You deserve that." Peaceful. I'd heard that word before, usually right after someone died. Now they were using it like they were doing me a favor. I bent down, picked up the torn grocery bag. A tomato had burst open on the tile, red, spreading like blood. Lena stepped back to keep her shoes clean. Small gesture, big meaning. I set the bag on the counter. Ryan said softly, "It's not that we don't appreciate what you've done, Dad. We just need to live our life. Need to live our life." I used to hear recruits say that when they left the unit. At least they were chasing freedom. My son said it while evicting the man who gave him a home. I took a slow breath. "All right," I said. "I see." 4 words. No anger, no tremor, but they drew a line we'd never cross again. Lena smiled. Ryan patted my shoulder. "It's for the best, Dad." I didn't reply. Their voices blurred into background noise. The hum of the fridge, the sound of them laughing a minute later like nothing had happened. I walked down the hall, Small window, narrow bed. That was my corner of the house now. I sat on the mattress, looked up at the ceiling. Cracks like veins across old paint. I meant to fix them. Ryan once said, "Don't bother Dad. It's fine." Nothing was fine. I looked at Nancy's picture on the nightstand. Her smile hadn't aged. Her eyes still kind. If she were here, she'd probably say, "Don't raise your voice, Earl. Let time answer." But time doesn't answer. It just makes the wound colder until you can't tell if it still hurts. Outside, the Oregon rain started tapping the tin roof. That sound steady, familiar, like the rhythm of a heart that refuses to stop. Their laughter drifted from the living room. Light, careless, the sound of people who believe the worst is already over. That's when I understood. They didn't want me gone out of anger. They wanted me gone because I'd become invisible. Familiarity had turned me into a ghost in my own home. "Looks like it's just me again," I whispered to Nancy's photo. And in that moment, something shifted. Not pain, not sadness. Focus. The same kind of focus I had overseas when a Jeep engine died under enemy fire and all you could hear was your own breathing. I didn't know what I'd do next. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let them write my ending. Thunder rolled in the distance. The house creaked, wood expanding, contracting like it was breathing. Maybe it knew what was coming before they did. They say war teaches men how to fight. Fatherhood teaches them how to endure. But endurance has limits. That day my son didn't just ask for space. He carved a distance that no bridge could ever cross. And once you cross that line, there's only one thing left to do. Disappear. The kind of disappearing they'll never forget. That night, Salem rain didn't stop. It fell steady, patient, tapping the old tin roof of my garage, the only sound keeping me tied to what was left of reality. The house was quiet, so quiet that every drop sounded like a memory landing somewhere it didn't belong. The living room was dark. Only a thin line of yellow light spilled from under the garage door, my refuge, my bunker, the place I went when my thoughts got too loud. I pushed open the steel door. The hinge cried a soft metallic note. Cold air drifted in, carrying the scent of oil metal and time. Everything in that garage was a piece of my life: old wrenches worn smooth by decades, a wooden workbench stained with grease and memory, a faded sign that read, U.S. Army Motor Corps. Those tools had never betrayed me. Can't say the same about people. I switched on the desk lamp. The yellow light cut through the shadows, landing on the old metal drawer. Inside was a small wooden box, Nancy's box. I hadn't opened it in 8 years, not because I forgot, but because I hadn't been strong enough to remember. I turned the key in the lock. The click was sharp, final, like the sound of a trigger. Inside, everything was just as I left it: a folded white handkerchief, a tarnished silver ring, a photograph of us 1983. I'd just come home from service, hair still black, hand holding hers, both of us smiling like we knew nothing could ever break us. And at the bottom, wrapped in brown paper, was a small metal key. I lifted it out. Cold, heavy, a kind of weight you can't measure in ounces. On the wrapping, in her handwriting, one line: "If he ever forgets what he built, remind him." I sat there for a long time, the words echoing louder than the rain. Forget what he built. What did that mean? I built this house with my own hands. I built a family. I built a life for Ryan. So what part of it had I forgotten? I opened the lid again, and the old scent rose up: Nancy's perfume, faint and sweet, mixed with the smell of engine oil. It hit me like a ghost breathing right behind my shoulder. And then I heard her, the memory clear as that last morning. We spoke. Kindness isn't weakness, Earl. She'd said that after I came home from the VA office holding a letter that said my benefits were being cut. I'd slammed the table. Nancy just smiled that knowing smile. Don't fight everyone, she told me. Some wars aren't worth your uniform. Her voice came back to me in that garage, not soft, not sad, just steady. I looked around the workbench. Photos of Ryan as a boy still lined the shelf. Him at 8 years old, grinning paint on his chin, handing me a wrench and saying, "Dad, can I help that boy?" was gone. In his place stood a man who told me I was in the way. I gripped the small key tighter. Its cold metal edge bit into my palm. It reminded me of the keys we carried in the army. Each one meant access, trust, survival. Lose it, and you risked everything. Nancy knew that. She wasn't leaving me a gift. She was leaving me a reminder: don't let them take what you built. I opened the right drawer of my workbench. Inside was my old maintenance logbook from the unit, oil-stained corners, bent pages yellow. I turned to the first blank page in nearly 10 years. Wrote 3 lines, September 14th, 2023. They said they're tired of seeing me. I won't argue. I'll observe. My handwriting shook, but my heart didn't. I put the pen down. Slipped Nancy's key into the chest pocket of my flannel shirt, the same pocket where I used to carry my service medal. I didn't know what it opened, but I knew what it unlocked, something in me that had gone quiet for too long. I stood up, stepped to the doorway. The rain had softened to a mist. The smell of wet earth filled the air. Across the yard, the street light threw a thin golden beam against the side of the house. Through the living room window, I saw Ryan and Lena sitting on the couch, laughing at something on TV. Their silhouettes looked peaceful, too peaceful. I stared for a moment, then turned away. Sometimes silence makes more noise than words ever could. I didn't need to say I'm disappointed. They'd already written that line themselves. I just breathed in steady and remembered what Nancy once said. When people forget gratitude, the universe reminds them one way or another. The key pressed cold against my skin. And for the first time in years, I felt something spark, not anger, not revenge, but awareness. This wasn't just about being a father anymore. It was a test. The final one life was going to hand me to keep what's mine, not with rage, but with memory. I turned back to the workbench, wiped the dust off my old army clock. The second hand still ticked. Time didn't stop. And neither would I. I took a strip of tape, pressed Nancy's note to the inside of the wooden box. Right beside her words, I wrote one more line in pencil: message received. Then I closed the lid, set it on the shelf. No speeches, no vows. Just silence, the kind only men who've seen everything collapse can understand. I turned off the light. The yellow glow slid across the concrete floor, then vanished. The garage went dark, but I didn't. In my pocket, the small key tapped against my chest, a quiet metallic rhythm, like a heartbeat, announcing the start of a new campaign. I didn't know what it would lead to, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel old. I didn't feel in the way. I felt alive. Men carry things the world will never see. Not medals, not victories, but promises to the ones they've lost and to the man they refuse to stop being. That night, I didn't yet know Nancy's key would change everything. I just knew one thing: from that moment on, Earl Thompson, the father they tried to erase, had begun preparing for the last war of his life. Morning came gray over Salem. The rain hadn't stopped, only slowed. Mist clung to the porch railing, and the sky looked heavy enough to fall. I sat in the kitchen, second cup of coffee, cooling in my hand, watching the blurred world through the wet window pane. Across the fence, the lights were already on at Helen Brooks's place, as they always were. Helen had lived next door for over 30 years. Her husband, Paul, a former Army medic, had passed a few years before Nancy. No kids, just a rose garden, a gray cat named Cooper, and memories nobody could steal. She and Nancy were close, the kind of friends who spoke in half sentences and still understood everything. They shopped together, baked together, and laughed at things I never really caught back, when I still believed laughter lasted forever. After Nancy died, Helen was the only one who still knocked every Sunday. She'd bring tea, ask a few questions, then sit in silence with me, the kind of silence you only share with someone who's already survived their losses. That morning, her voice came across the fence. "Earl, come over for a minute. I made lemon cake." I didn't feel like company, but I went anyway. The words from last night, Ryan's words, were still echoing somewhere deep, like a bruise that hadn't decided what color it wanted to be. Helen's kitchen was warm, smelled of lemon cake and black tea. She poured me a cup and sat across the table. The light coming through the curtain was pale, the kind that makes everything feel fragile. For a while, we didn't talk. Then she asked, gentle but deliberate, "Ryan told me you're moving to assisted living." I looked up. Thought I misheard. "What?" She studied me for a long moment, like a teacher watching a student who forgot his own name. "He said you've been tired lately, and that you're planning to move into a facility in Portland. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." I let out a small laugh, no humor in it. That's news to me. The air between us tightened. Helen set down her cup, tilted her head. "So, you're not moving, no. Not unless someone moves me by force." She sighed. Her voice dropped lower, each word carrying the weight of experience. "Be careful, Earl. Families change fast when money's involved." The words landed heavy like a wrench dropped on a concrete floor. I didn't answer. Helen looked at me, not nosy, not dramatic, just worried. "I've seen it before," she said. "When Paul's brother passed, his kids fought over a house smaller than yours. It gets ugly fast, especially when someone convinces the others that the old man can't handle things anymore." I pressed my lips together. She wasn't wrong. And Helen never wasted breath on words that didn't matter. "You think they're planning something?" I asked quietly. She met my eyes. "I think she said you should keep yours open." That look, steady knowing, made something cold settle inside me. If Ryan had really told people I was moving to assisted living, then he was already planting the story that I was slipping, confused, not fit to manage my own life. A soft narrative, easy to believe. A prelude to a signature. One signature away from erasing me. I'd heard stories like this from other veterans, men whose greatest battles began after the war ended, where trust was the first casualty. I finished my tea and stood. "Thanks, Helen." As I reached the door, she called after me, "Earl, don't wait until it's too late to lock the right doors." That line stayed with me all the way home. It echoed louder than the rain. The house was silent. Ryan and Lena were out. I hung my coat, walked down the hall to the garage. The metal door was half open, the air damp, smelling of oil and iron. I sat at my workbench, pulled open the drawer, and took out my old camera, a bulky Sony I once used in the Army to record engine maintenance drills. Heavy, outdated, but dependable like me. I wiped the lens slide in a new drive, plugged it into the wall socket. A small green light came on. Tiny, but alive, like the first spark of a plan. I circled the garage, studying the best angles. Finally mounted it high, facing the entryway that led to the kitchen. From there, I could see the file cabinet, the small safe, every door that mattered. I stepped back, checked the frame. Everything was in view. In the service they used to tell us the first rule of defense is awareness. If you can't see the threat, you've already lost. I took out my notebook, wrote installed camera, trust no one until proven otherwise. My hand trembled a little, but the writing didn't stop. From that moment on, I wasn't a father trying to keep the peace. I was a soldier again, watching the battlefield that used to be my home. Later that afternoon, Ryan came home. I stayed in the garage, pretending to tinker with the old Jeep. He opened the door, leaned in casually. "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" "Perfect," I said without looking up. I could feel his eyes scanning the room, pausing on the workbench, the toolbox, the locked drawer. That look, I'd seen it before. Not curiosity, calculation. "You should rest more," he said. "You've been spending a lot of time out here lately." "Old habits," I muttered. "Can't fix a man who fixes things." He gave a short laugh, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, then walked away. The door closed. The silence returned. I looked up at the small green light on the camera. It blinked once, steady, patient. In its reflection, I saw my own face, older, lined, but alert. Alive. "Let's see what they're planning," I whispered. Night fell. The house turned quiet, too quiet. I sat in my room, lights off, the small monitor glowing faint blue beside me. The feed showed the kitchen, the hallway, the faint light from the living room. Nothing. Just stillness. Until close to midnight. Lena appeared, barefoot, quiet, moving with the precision of someone who'd practiced. Hair tied back, thin robe, phone in hand. She went straight to the file cabinet, opened the bottom drawer. Light from her phone lit her face, calm, focused, like she was reading instructions. She flipped through folders, paused on one stack, held up her phone. Click, click, click. Then she shut the drawer, walked out. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. Not angry, not shocked. Just confirmed. Helen was right. War doesn't always start with gunfire. Sometimes it starts when people pretend nothing's wrong. I turned off the monitor. Leaning back, I listened to the rain starting up again outside, steady, relentless. In my pocket, Nancy's key rested against my chest, cold, heavy, as if waiting for the right moment to unlock something bigger. "Thank you, Helen," I whispered. Message received. They say war only happens once in a lifetime. But that's not true. It comes back every time you trust the wrong person. Helen had given me the warning. And that night, as I replayed the footage, I knew this wasn't about a father and a son anymore. This was about defending what memory had built. My final campaign had just begun. Morning came damp over Salem. The air still smelled of rain and turned earth. I stepped onto the porch, reached for the old steel mailbox, mostly bills and advertisements these days. But not today. Inside was something else. A brown envelope. No stamp, no return address. Handwriting, shaky ink, faded by moisture. One line only written in blue: "Don't sign anything. They're planning something." No name, no greeting. Just a message dropped like a bullet fired from the dark. I stood there a while, the metal of Nancy's key pressing cold against my chest from inside my shirt. Her voice echoed faintly. "Remind him." I took the envelope inside, set it beside the coffee pot. The sound of each drip felt like a countdown. I read the note again and again. Short, sharp, military. Whoever wrote it had once given orders, not advice. Helen, maybe. Or someone from the old unit. Someone who still remembered a debt I couldn't tell. But I knew the tone, not warning. Instruction. I looked out the window. The yard was still wet grass, dark from rain. Beyond the fence, Ryan and Lena were loading the car. From here, I could hear fragments of their conversation, laughter, car doors, and Lena's voice bright and careless. "Don't forget the documents. I need to scan them." That one-word documents was enough. I didn't need to hear more. Helen's warning had just turned real. That night I sat in the garage again. The monitor's pale blue glow flickered across the workbench. I replayed the footage from the night before Lena at the cabinet. This time I slowed it down frame by frame. She wasn't just taking photos. She flipped to the last page of a folder, the page with my signature. The phone light caught the header for a brief second. I zoomed in. Property Title Transfer Agreement. The words punched harder than any shell blast I'd heard. 7 years ago, I'd signed that document during a mortgage restructuring, added Ryan's name for collateral purposes. Half the house under both our names. At the time, I thought it was symbolic. A father's way of saying, "This will all be yours one day." Now I realized I'd left the front gate wide open. I watched the rest of the clip. Lena closed the drawer, slipped her phone into her robe pocket, and walked out, calm, confident, like someone following instructions perfectly. No guilt, no hesitation, just control. I sat there under the yellow light, hand gripping the pencil so tight it almost snapped. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Do not confront. Confirm. They're planning document forgery." Next step. Secure originals. The word forgery came out shaky at first, then darker, heavier. In the service we used to say, never react to the first shot. Wait for the second. That's when you see the pattern. So I waited. No reaction, no confrontation, only observation. Around 9 that night, Ryan came home. I was at the dining table pretending to watch the evening news. He hung his coat, grabbed a beer, sat across from me. "Dad, you got a letter today?" I turned my head slowly. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, I saw it on the porch this morning before we left." "Thought it was from the bank." His tone was casual, but his eyes, they dodged mine like a man stepping through a minefield. I smiled slightly. "Just junk mail." He nodded, relief flashing across his face too quickly to hide. The TV carried on in the background. The anchor's voice crisp, detached in tonight's report. Financial scams targeting seniors are on the rise. Ryan didn't hear. But I did. Every word. When he went upstairs, I stayed in the kitchen. The light from the ceiling fell flat across the wooden table. I opened the drawer, pulled out the notebook, and wrote possible collusion between Ryan and Lena. No emotional response. Operate as infield protocol, silent, steady, unseen. I closed the book, looked through the window. The garage light still glowed faintly outside, its reflection showing my face in the glass, older, heavier, but sharper. Nancy's voice echoed from long ago. "When they underestimate you, don't correct them. Let them." I smiled, not with joy, but with recognition. For the first time in years, I wasn't a bystander. I was back on duty. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I cataloged everything. Every folder, every serial number, every seal and date stamp in the house. I made 3 sets of records. One stayed in the safe, one I kept on me, and one would go into a private safety box at the bank tomorrow morning. No one had taught me how to be a father, but I damn well knew how to survive. Before shutting off the light, I looked again at the brown envelope. Don't sign anything. They're planning something. I flipped it over and saw a faint pencil mark 3 half letters at the bottom, like someone had started writing, then stopped. Under the lamp, I tilted it, and the letters came through just enough to read from H. Helen. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. So she'd seen something. But why stay silent? Why not tell me face to face? Maybe she was afraid. Or maybe she knew the same truth I did, that once a story like this starts, you can't stop it by talking. You can only outwait it. Either way, I wasn't alone in the dark anymore. Someone else was watching the same storm roll in. It had been 3 days since Ryan said that sentence. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. But I knew better. Quiet isn't peace. It's the pause before the first strike. I looked at the letter one last time, then folded it neatly, slid it into the logbook. Outside, rain started again, soft, rhythmic, like a reminder that time never really stops. Nancy used to say, kindness isn't weakness. Maybe she was right. But in some wars, silence is the cruelest strategy of all. Late October, Salem was drowning in rain. The sky went dark before 4, and I had to turn the kitchen lights on just to see my own hands. The house smelled heavy wet wood, and that lavender air freshener Lena loved. A sweet, polished scent that never belonged here, never belonged to me. I sat in the garage, the only place still carrying my scent. Metal, oil, dust. The wrench on my workbench caught the glow of the desk lamp, throwing back the reflection of a man trying to stay calm while the wind screamed outside. The thunder that night didn't sound like weather. It sounded like memory, like engines and mortars and long nights when no one dared to close their eyes. Only difference this time, the battlefield wasn't a desert. It was the home I built with my own 2 hands. Around 8, a sharp crack split the air. Then darkness. The lights died, and the garage fell into a black so thick I could hear my heartbeat echo off the walls. Instinct took over. My hand reached for the flashlight hanging by the door. A thin beam cut through the dark, catching smoke curling along the corner wall. Then came the smell, sharp, chemical, unmistakable. Burning wire. A thin thread of smoke rose from the outlet near my workbench, the same one that powered the security camera charger. The scent of melted plastic filled the air, thick and sour. I stepped closer, ready to unplug the cord, when the door burst open. Heels slammed against concrete. Lena's voice pierced the dark, shrill, and rehearsed. "Oh my God, Earl. What did you do? You almost burned the house down." Ryan followed his face, caught between panic and confusion. "Dad, are you okay? What happened?" I didn't answer. Not right away. I looked at the smoke, then at the socket. Then I bent down, calm as breath, and pulled the plug. The plastic was blackened, the copper wires. Cleanly stripped edges so smooth it could have been cut with a scalpel. I turned toward them, voice low, rough, steady. Something shorted the wire. Lena crossed her arms, eyes glinting like a blade. "You can't keep doing these things, Earl. You're not focused lately. You could have killed us," Ryan frowned. "Lena." "Ryan," she snapped, voice rising. "This is serious. He's been acting strange, forgetful, and now this." "What if the whole house went up in flames?" She turned to me, tone sharp, clinical. "You need help, professional help." I met her stare. Cold, still, like cooled steel. "The breaker tripped," I said evenly. "Nothing caught fire." Her smile curved, mocking, controlled. "It could have." "Yes," I said slower now, "if someone tampered with the wiring." The room froze. No one breathed. No one moved. Ryan's eyes flicked between us, hesitant, afraid to pick a side. The look of a man convincing himself his father was losing his grip. I'd seen that look before in young soldiers who doubted their own men. Lena broke the silence first. "Let's go inside, Ryan. He needs rest." They left. The door shut softly, but in my head it sounded like a gunshot. I sat back down, the burnt socket still warm in my hand. One glance told me everything. This wasn't an accident. The safety ground was removed clean, precise. A staged failure. But I didn't get angry. I'd learned a long time ago the survivors aren't the strongest. They're the calmest. I took my phone, snapped 3 photos, the wire, the melted plastic, the smoke mark on the wall. Any engineer would see the truth. Someone had cut it. I turned toward the camera system. The red indicator blinked faintly. Power had tripped mid-recording, but the temporary memory remained. I inserted a backup USB. The system beeped once, green light flashing alive. "Got you," I whispered. I didn't sleep that night. The rain hit the tin roof steady and slow, like a heartbeat counting down to something inevitable. At the desk, I opened my small notebook and wrote, "Incident. Electrical sabotage. Evidence. Photos plus video backup. Response? None. Maintain silence." Then I stopped, took one deep breath. No confrontation. That's what they wanted. They wanted rage proof that I was unstable, that the story of the old man losing it was true. No. They weren't getting that version. I'd write my own. Morning came, gray rain still falling. I drove to First Trust Bank downtown. The clerk recognized me before I spoke. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson." "Morning," I said, voice level. "I'd like to deposit something in my private box." "As usual, number 12. "Number 12. She put on white gloves, opened the vault, and handed me the log. I placed a thick envelope on the counter. Inside, USB drive, camera footage. 3 photographs of the burnt socket. Original house deed. A note. "If anything happens to me, contact Frank Davis." Frank Davis, old friend, lawyer, and once my commanding officer. We'd shared a can of beans in a sandstorm back in '91. If anyone could read between my lines, it was him. The clerk sealed the envelope, slid it into the metal box, and locked it with a sharp, metallic click. I felt lighter, like sliding the final round into a chamber ready waiting. By afternoon, I was back home. The house was quiet, cold, empty. I went straight to the garage, sat down, opened Nancy's wooden box. Her picture still lay inside, eyes soft, steady, kind. "I'm still here, Nancy," I whispered. Not a promise, a report. A soldier checking in with his commander. Position held. I looked around, cracked walls, damp floor, the air still thick with the faint, bitter smell of burnt plastic. On the desk, my notebook lay open, ink still drying. I added another line. "If they want a fire, I'll give them one. Just not the kind they expect." That night, I remembered Nancy's words. "Patience is not surrender, Earl." They thought I didn't know. They thought I was old, slow, fading. But I'd survived nights longer than this, nights where one wrong sound meant you didn't make it to dawn. I didn't turn the lights off. Instead, I checked every lock, every wire, every hinge. And that's when I found it, the cabinet latch. Loose. Not broken, turned. Exactly 1/4 turn. Someone had opened it, then closed it again. I tapped the metal. Hollow. The folders were still there. But were they mine anymore? I pulled one out. Signatures perfect. Stamps clean. But beneath the witness line, a faint stroke, different ink. Not my pen. I smiled. Not in satisfaction, in clarity. At last I could see the shape of the enemy. Outside, the rain eased into a drizzle. The chains on the door rattled faintly in the wind. The air still carried that burnt scent, the smell of warning, the smell of awakening. From this night forward, every move had to be exact, as clean and deliberate as releasing a rifle's safety. One mistake and I'd lose everything. But they didn't know. I'd spent my whole life inside machines more dangerous than this family. I wasn't afraid of fire. I was afraid of forgetting who I was fighting for. I looked back at Nancy's photo. Her smile still there, gentle, firm, forgiving. "You'd be proud, Nancy," I said quietly. "I'm not done yet." Lightning flashed outside its light, catching the glass frame for a split second. I saw both of us reflected there. Not the old man they tried to erase, but the soldier position, chosen locks secured, ready for the night to burn. Sunday, early November. Salem was cold and dry, the kind of cold that bites through your jacket, the kind that smells like metal before a storm. The sky was steel gray, stretched tight, like a sheet of iron. The last oak leaves spun down the path, twisting in the wind, as if trying to hold on to a season already gone. I sat on the porch with a mug of black coffee. Steam rose from it like the last breath of peace. From down the road, I heard an engine, Ryan's silver SUV. Lena's laughter cut through the air, before they even parked, high, brittle, like glass cracking in the cold. They came in together, their perfume sweeping through the house, chasing away the scent of oil and old wood that I called home. I didn't look up, just listened, heels on the hardwood, click, 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 like a countdown before detonation. Dad Ryan started too cheerful. "We've been looking at some houses in Portland." I nodded, slightly, eyes on the newspaper. "Portland, huh?" "Yeah," he said. "Bigger place. Closer to my office. And Lena found a great school district in case we have kids someday." Lena sat down across from me, legs crossed, smile practiced. "You could move sooner, Earl. There's a lovely assisted living community near Lake Oswego. Peaceful, safe. They even have woodworking classes." I lowered the paper, looked at them both, not angry, just aware. Like watching a play I'd already memorized the script for. The way Ryan's voice lifted, the way Lena smiled, every word rehearsed in front of a mirror. "Peaceful," I said quietly. "That's what everyone says before the war starts." Silence. Just one heartbeat long. Then Lena smiled again, thin and sharp. "See, he's still sharp." Ryan forced a chuckle. "We just want what's best for you, Dad." I took a sip of coffee. The bitterness filled my mouth, but the cold inside was worse. They thought I didn't hear the words beneath the words. Peaceful. Safe. Best for you. In the military, when someone said, "It's safe," it meant something was about to explode. That night, the house grew quiet again. The wind howled, rain tapping faintly on the roof. I sat in my office, the desk lamp casting its soft yellow glow over the wall lined with Nancy's photos. Then voices, low, sharp, traveling down the hallway, like blades slipping through the dark. "He's old. He'll give up soon. Just be patient, Ryan. Once it's in our name, he won't be a problem." "He trusts me," Ryan said. "Always has." "Good," Lena whispered, soft and poisonous. "Keep it that way." I closed my eyes, listened. Not to eavesdrop, to remember. They weren't threats. They were plans. And they thought I didn't know. Nancy once said, "The scariest thing about betrayal is how normal it sounds." Tonight, I understood that completely. I opened the drawer, pulled out my old notebook. The last line still read, "If they want a fire, I'll give them one." I turned to a new page. Picked up my pen and wrote slowly, like signing an order, Operation Disappear. The word operation made me smile. It had been years since I'd written it. In the army, every operation had a target, a route, and an enemy. This one did too, only this time the battlefield was called home. I scrolled through my contacts, stopped on a name I hadn't dialed in years, Frank Davis. Old friend, old comrade, now lawyer. I pressed call. One ring, two. A deep gravel voice answered. Earl, Jesus, it's been years. Everything all right? Not exactly. What's going on, Frank? I need you to look into my house papers. Quietly. There was silence. Then the faint click of his pen. You sure you want to fight this? I looked around the room, the wedding photo, Nancy's smile half faded under dust. Not fight, I said slowly. Just finish. He exhaled. Come by tomorrow morning. Bring everything. No one else should know, understood? I hung up. The click of the phone sounded small, but in the quiet, it echoed like a gun being cocked. Around midnight, I stepped out onto the porch. The rain had stopped. The air was cold, damp, heavy with silence. The wooden sign by the gate, Thompson Residence, hung crooked letters, cracked edges gray from years of weather. I remembered carving it myself back in '98. The year Nancy said, we finally have something that's ours. Now I just wanted to take it down. Not out of anger, but because the name only lived in memory now, not inside these walls. I reached into my pocket, closed my hand around the key Nancy had left me. Cold, heavy, real. I still didn't know what it opened, but I knew one day it would. And when it did, it would answer everything. On my way back inside, I stopped by the staircase. There on the shelf was a photo of Ryan at 10 baseball uniform, bright grin, holding a little gold trophy. I remembered Nancy that day, her voice soft. He's just like you, Earl. Steady, proud, always ready. I brushed the dust off the frame. No one touched it anymore. I smiled. Not out of sadness, but because I finally understood. That boy was gone. The man upstairs was just someone wearing his face. I walked down the hallway. The mirror caught my reflection, older, yes, but eyes still sharp, still steady. They say there are two kinds of soldiers, those who fear war and those who know it too well to be afraid. I was the second kind. I looked myself in the mirror and knew this war wouldn't need bullets. It would need discipline. Something Ryan and Lena would never understand. I pulled out my phone and typed 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'll bring everything. Then I deleted the message. No trace. Old habits die hard. Sometime after 1, a faint sound came from downstairs. I turned off the light, moved quietly down the steps. From the kitchen door, a sliver of light leaked through. Lena. She was standing by the file cabinet, her phone flashlight cutting through the dark. I watched as she flipped through folders, then stopped on a blue one, property ownership and mortgage records. She photographed each page, slow, careful, practiced. The glow of her screen lit her face cold. Steady, no hesitation. When she was done, she slid the drawer back perfectly aligned. Then she turned, typing something on her phone, smiling faintly as she walked away. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Above us, the faint red light of the security camera blinked, recording everything. When she disappeared up the stairs, I whispered to no one. Wrong move, Lena. I went back to my room, opened the notebook again. Under Operation Disappear, I wrote Phase 2, Legal Lockdown, Objective Transfer Authority to Davis, Cover Story, Medical Leave. I put the pen down. The desk lamp cast my shadow against Nancy's photo on the wall. 2 silhouettes side by side, one living, one gone. "Tomorrow, Nancy," I said softly, "we start." I knew I couldn't win with strength, but I had something they didn't: time, memory, and discipline. Those 3 things had kept me alive once. They'd do it again. The wind howled outside. Metal chains on the porch rattled softly. In my pocket, the key shifted, tapping faintly against my chest. A small sound. But enough. Enough to remind me Nancy was still here. That this fight wasn't about revenge. It was about taking myself back. Outside, the wooden sign creaked in the wind, a slow, steady rhythm like a drum before battle. I looked into the dark voice, quiet, commanding, steady as the man I used to be. Time to move, soldier. Tomorrow I wouldn't be the father left behind. I'd be what I was always meant to be: a soldier preparing for war. 3 weeks later. Early winter settled over Salem. Fog hung thick over every street, a white curtain drawn across the town. The oak tree in my yard had lost its last leaf, bare branches clawing at the gray sky. The sign by the gate still read Thompson Residence, but the house behind it looked abandoned: windows, dim curtains, still like a place holding its breath. On the living room sofa lay a worn leather jacket frayed at the cuffs. Next to it, a wallet, a phone, and a folded morning paper still wrapped in plastic. The coffee cup on the table was still warm. But Earl Thompson, the man who lived here, was gone. Ryan was the first to find out. He came by around 8 to get some papers that needed his father's signature. The front door wasn't locked. Lights were on, but the house was silent. Dad wouldn't answer. Just the ticking clock and the wind scraping against the window pane. He walked into the kitchen. The fridge door was slightly open. A bowl of oatmeal sat on the table, cold. On the counter, his father's phone buzzed once. A message on the screen read, "Call me when you get this. Frank." Ryan frowned, unlocked it. No password. Call history empty. Only one outgoing text sent last night at 11:47 p.m. "See you soon." 2 hours later, the story spread through the neighborhood. Police arrived. Yellow tape went up. A search team combed the banks of the Columbia River, where Earl's gray Ford pickup was found parked on a muddy lot. Keys in the ignition. Headlights off. The driver's seat pushed back as if someone had stepped out and never returned. On the passenger seat, a wool beanie with a smear of mud. On the floor, a folded veteran ID card wet with dew. A young officer crouched, his breath fogging the air. Missing veteran. Male 68. No signs of struggle. Vehicle abandoned. He wrote it down flat, detached, as if it were just another case. But in a town like Salem, nothing was ever just another case. That night, the local news opened with it. Breaking news: police are searching for a 68-year-old veteran, Earl Thompson, who went missing early this morning. His vehicle was found near the Columbia River. Authorities suspect accidental drowning, but the investigation is ongoing. The photo on the screen showed me standing in front of the house, brown jacket, hand holding an American flag. Below it, the headline rolled across: "Missing Veteran. Community in shock." Across town, Helen Brooks sat frozen in her living room. The TV light flickered on her face. Her hands trembled as she picked up the remote. On the table before her sat a cup of cold tea and a gray envelope marked in handwriting she knew too well. "Deliver to Frank Davis if anything happens." She touched the envelope gently, took a deep breath, and whispered, "You really did it, didn't you, Earl?" The next morning, Frank Davis walked into the Salem Police Department. Gray suit, steady eyes. "I'm Mr. Thompson's legal representative," he said. The desk sergeant looked up. Family's already been notified. They said he'd been distant lately. Frank's voice was calm. He was a soldier. Distance isn't unusual for men like him. He handed over a sealed envelope, asked that it be logged officially. Inside were two things, a single handwritten note and a USB drive. The note read, "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Do not search. Everything is where it should be." Ryan arrived soon after, eyes red, hands shaking. When the officer mentioned possible drowning, he froze. No, he wouldn't just leave like that. Lena slipped an arm around his shoulder, voice smooth, controlled. He's been confused lately. He might have wandered off. Frank turned to her. His tone never changed. Confused, Mrs. Thompson. I spoke to him last week. He was sharper than most men half his age. She swallowed hard, looked away. Ryan signed the property access authorization, his hands trembling. The form allowed temporary control of Earl's assets until the court declared him deceased. Lena's lips curved slightly, a smile only she understood. That night, the house lit up again. From across the street, Helen stood under the rain-soaked eaves watching through the window. Inside, Ryan and Lena spoke with a bank attorney. Lena's voice carried through the gap in the door. "Once the paperwork clears, we can sell it. He's not coming back." Helen turned away, walking slowly down the foggy road, her hand clenched around the envelope in her coat pocket. Under her breath, she whispered words the wind carried away. "You should have known better, girl. They say when a soldier disappears, no one can tell whether it's defeat or a mission." 3:15 a.m. I left the house. Took only two things, the key Nancy left me and a map of the Columbia River marked 2 weeks ago. I parked the truck at the lot near the river bend. Close enough for the city cameras to catch the taillights, but hidden from view. I wiped the handles clean, left the keys in, slid the driver's seat back, a detail small enough to suggest a man leaving in haste. On the passenger seat, I placed my beanie and my veteran ID slightly damp from river water, a believable trace for a missing person report. Then I walked down toward the riverbank, turned left into the trail that led through the woods. No cameras, no witnesses. Helen was waiting there as planned. She shivered in the fog. "You sure about this, Earl?" "It's the only way," I said. "They won't stop until they think I'm gone." She handed me an old leather bag. Inside, a clean set of clothes, a prepaid phone, and a bus ticket heading north. "Frank will handle the rest," she said softly. "And be careful." I nodded once. No handshake, no goodbye. Just the silent salute of people who've already survived too many farewells. I wasn't running. I was retreating from view. Because some battles you only win by letting the enemy believe you've already lost. I'd used that tactic once before Iraq 1991. It worked. Not because I was stronger, because I was patient. 4 days later, the Salem Gazette printed my obituary. Veteran presumed dead, family to hold memorial service. My black and white photo filled half the page beside a note from the local Veterans Association. Ryan sat in his study, hands shaking as he read it. "I should have said something," he whispered. "You did what you could," Lena said softly. "He was stubborn. It's not your fault." He didn't answer. For the first time in years, he didn't argue. He just stared at my picture, the face of a man he thought was gone, and the eyes staring back at him weren't accusing. They were waiting. Because the moment they believed I was dead, the real game began. This time I didn't need weapons. I had something stronger: time law and a plan. That evening, Helen opened her mailbox. Inside was a small envelope, no return address. She tore it open carefully. Inside was a single handwritten card. Stage 1, complete. Keep them watching the river. She smiled, a tremor of relief in her breath. He's still breathing, she whispered, half shaking, half proud. I had survived mortars, sandstorms, and nights that burned like hellfire. Now I was surviving lies. And I realized something: sometimes the only way to live is to let the world believe you're gone. 6 days later, a small town in northern Idaho. One gas station, one diner that closed at 8, and a row of old wooden cabins lining the edge of the pine forest. I rented the last one, cabin number 7. Roof-sagging walls, the color of smoke, but quiet. Through the window I could see the Snake River curve past the trees, cold, slow, deep. I grew a beard, cut my hair short, changed my truck. The old gray pickup was still back in Salem by the Columbia. Now I drove a 2006 Ford Ranger with Idaho plates. On paper, I was Earl Turner, retired mechanic, partial memory loss from an old head injury. A story, believable enough, that no one asked questions. By day, I worked in a small repair shop owned by an old man named Jack, lived alone, spoke little, and cared even less about anyone's past. By night, I sat on the porch of that cabin, listened to the wind through the pines, the call of an owl somewhere far off, and sometimes Nancy's voice in the back of my mind. I wasn't afraid of loneliness anymore. When you fake your death, the hardest part isn't disappearing. It's learning how to live as if you never existed. Saturday morning. I was cleaning a wrench set when I heard a car pull up. Engine quiet, hybrid black sedan. Sound I knew. Frank Davis. He stepped out, coat collar, turned up leather case in hand, dark glasses hiding half his face. He looked around first the way men do when they've spent years watching their backs, then walked toward me. You look different, he said, voice gravelly. You look the same, I answered, half smiling. He set the case down on the table. How's exile treating you? Better than command duty, I said. No one's shooting at me here. Frank chuckled. Then he opened the case, pulled out a thick envelope and placed it in front of me. House sold, he said. Private buyer through the Veteran Trust. Full payment transferred to your off-record account in Boise. I was quiet a while. Buyer's name, Homes for Veterans Foundation. A laugh slipped out, low, rough, but real. You clever bastard. Frank shrugged. You once told me if you ever go down, make it look like a mission. So I did. He pulled a photo from the folder, the old house in Salem, fresh grass, bright sky, and a sold sign staked in the yard. Below it, a caption from the local paper, property of late veteran Earl Thompson, officially donated to Homes for Veterans Foundation. I stared at it for a long time. Not sad, not proud. Just quiet. That house had been my battlefield. Now it would be a refuge for men like I used to be, the ones who came home but never really returned. Nancy once said, if you ever forget what you built, remind yourself why you built it. Now I understood. We build not to keep, but to leave behind, for someone who still knows the meaning of effort. Frank studied me, eyes steady, half pride, half worry. You sure about staying out here? You could come back, claim your pension, your rights. I shook my head. If I come back, the story ends wrong. They need to believe I'm gone. He nodded slowly. Ryan and Lena. I paused. They'll spend months chasing a deed that doesn't exist. The house isn't in their name, never was, not legally. Frank, you made it bulletproof, right? As bulletproof as the law allows, he said. The trust belongs to the foundation now. The funds go to veteran housing programs. Your signature was notarized and sealed a week before your disappearance. I nodded. Good. Then we're done. Frank was silent for a moment. You're not going to reach out to him, to Ryan, no. He buried me once. I'll let him live with that. Frank lit a cigarette. The smoke curled between us. You know, Earl, most people do revenge loud. You do it like a ghost. I smiled faintly, gazing out past the porch rail where the pine shadows reached toward the river. Some ghosts earn their peace. He nodded, crushed the cigarette under his boot, and turned to leave. At the door, he said without looking back, Nancy would have been proud. I didn't answer. Just listened to the sound of his car fade until it was gone. Evening came fast. The sky turned the color of burned copper. I sat on the porch with a mug of hot tea, watching the last light bleed through the trees. On the table lay Frank's envelope, still sealed. Inside, copies of the sale transfer confirmations, and a small folded note in his handwriting, Stage 2 complete. Operation finished. I folded it into my notebook next to the line I wrote months ago. If they want a fire, I'll give them one. Then I added one more. And now the fire is out. I turned on the old radio by the window, found a static-filled Oregon news channel. The anchor's voice came through distant and warped. Former Salem resident Earl Thompson, honored posthumously for his community service. His family declined to comment. I listened, then laughed quietly, not the laugh of victory, but of someone who finally understood that losing everything was sometimes the only way to keep himself whole. Night settled. I lit a lamp, opened the window. The air smelled of pine and snow. On the table, Nancy's photograph caught the soft yellow light. I looked at her face and whispered, "It's over, Nancy. They can have the story. I'll keep the silence." My hand went to the key around my neck, warm now, metal-shaped by skin. It didn't open anything anymore. It opened peace. In the army, I learned one thing. Not everyone who survives is a victor. The victors are those who know when to stop, when to vanish. I had nothing left to prove. No more wars to fight. No revenge to chase. Because justice isn't found in courtrooms or bank accounts. It's found in that single moment when the betrayer looks around and realizes they've lost the one thing they can never buy back: forgiveness. Darkness spread over the forest. I sat in the quiet, listening to the slow current of the river. From far down the road, a single headlight swept past the cabin window, throwing a brief pale glow across the wall. For an instant, I saw my own shadow there, steady, composed, no longer the man cast out of his home, but the man who chose to walk away. I closed my eyes and murmured, "Let them think I'm gone." Some ghosts earn their peace. 1 week later. Salem drowned beneath a gray storm. The sky was a pane of glass, dim and colorless, its reflection bleeding down empty streets. The oak tree in front of the old Thompson house had lost a limb. Leaves lay scattered, slick and heavy with rain. And on the soaked lawn stood a new sign, red letters cutting through the mist like a wound: sold property of Homes for Veterans Foundation. It glared through the rain, a final slash across memory. Ryan stood motionless. Shirt clinging to his back, rain dripping down his neck, eyes fixed on the sign as if staring hard enough could undo what was written. In his hand, a folded document from the county land office, trembled ink bleeding under the rain, transfer of ownership, signed Earl Thompson. The wind tore at the page, ripping the edge. Ryan didn't move. An hour earlier, he was in his office sorting through files when his email chimed. Notification, Oregon Land Office. He clicked. The message was short, dry, bureaucratic, but it hit like a bullet. Transfer of property finalized. New ownership recorded Homes for Veterans Foundation. Signed by Earl Thompson. He read it once, then again, until his eyes locked on the last line signed by Earl Thompson. What the hell? The phone slipped from his hand. Coffee spilled across the desk, soaking paperwork in brown streaks. His heart pounded against his ribs. Lena walked in, voice casual, lips curved. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Ryan's voice cracked. "The house. It's gone. Gone. He sold it, Lena. He sold it. That's impossible. He's dead." Ryan snapped. "Apparently not." He slammed his phone on the desk. The screen glowed with the signature, the same bold, precise stroke he'd seen 1,000 times on his father's paperwork. Unmistakable. Lena froze. A flicker fear maybe passed through her eyes before she smothered it under a thin smile. Maybe it's a mistake. "Some legal mix-up." "Mix-up," Ryan shouted. "You saw it. That's his handwriting." He shut his laptop, grabbed his keys. "I'm going there." The rain thickened sheets of water slapping the windshield as his car tore down the highway. The wipers screeched in rhythm, headlights carving tunnels through the fog. Memories flickered between flashes of lightning. His father laughing, grease-stained hands wiping the old wooden table the summer they rebuilt the garage together. The sound of Nancy's voice through an open window. And then that sentence. "I'm tired of seeing you every day." It cut through his thoughts like shrapnel. He pressed the pedal harder. The speedometer climbed. Rain hammered the glass like 1,000 stones. The house appeared through the curtain of water like a ghost resurfacing. Streetlights glinted off the red sold sign, the color bleeding in the rain like fresh rust. Ryan slammed the door open. Boots sinking into the mud. He walked forward slowly, each step heavier than the last. No. No, no. He touched the sign. It was cold, bolted deep into the ground. Unmovable. He ran to the door, pounding with both fists. "Dad, Dad." Only the rain answered, drumming against the tin roof, steady and merciless. He pressed his face to the window. Inside, nothing. The photos along the staircase gone. The leather chair by the fireplace gone. Even the clock on the wall gone. Only a blank wall remained, a single rusted nail jutting out. He stared at it as if it were proof that someone had once existed there. "You can't do this," he whispered. "You can't take it away from me." The first tear slipped down his cheek, lost in the rain. For the first time in his life, he realized the house, everything he thought was his, had never belonged to him at all. That afternoon, a police car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, umbrellas in hand. "Mr. Ryan Thompson." "Yeah." "What now? We need to speak with you about your father." Ryan gave a bitter laugh. "He's dead, officer. You were at the memorial." The male officer spoke carefully. "That's the thing, sir. He's not." The words hit like thunder. "Excuse me, a man matching his description was seen in Idaho. Verified ID, veteran number, facial match, 98%. He identified himself as Earl Thompson." Ryan's lips parted, but no sound came. The female officer handed him a photo printed from a gas station security camera. A man with a thick beard wearing a wool cap filling up an old truck. Eyes fixed on the camera. Cold, alert, alive, Earl, no doubt. Ryan's knees buckled. He sank onto the porch steps, gripping the photo. "He's alive," he whispered. "Ryan, maybe." "Don't," he snapped. "It's him. I know it." Lena took a step back, eyes darting away. Ryan turned sharply, voice shaking. "You knew. What you knew, he was alive. That's insane. You helped me file for ownership, didn't you? You called the lawyer, said we needed to finalize the transfer. That was for us, Ryan. You said I said a lot of things," he cut in, voice breaking. "But he planned all this." He raised the photo, trembling. "He's been watching us." A gust of wind tore the picture from his hand. It spun through the rain, slapped against the window pane, Earl's face staring back through glass, through storm, through time. Ryan dropped to his knees, hands clutching his head. "You planned this, didn't you?" "Dad." Thunder cracked overhead. Rain poured harder, washing over him like judgment. The sold sign wrenched loose, snapping in half as it hit the ground. Wood splintered. The sound echoed through the empty street, sharp, final. "You can't do this," Ryan screamed. "This is our home." But the house stood silent, unmoved. Rain soaked his face, his voice, his pride, until only emptiness remained. They say victory in silence is the sweetest kind. I don't believe that. Real victory is when you no longer need to prove anything. When I walked away from that house, I carried nothing but Nancy's memory. They took the walls, the roof, the address, but not the meaning. They thought they'd claimed an inheritance. What they really got was a mirror. Every word Ryan shouted that night was an echo of what he once said to me. Every drop of rain on his hands was a tear I'd swallowed years ago, the day he threw me out of that same door. And when he saw my name on the sale document, that was the first time he ever understood what loss really feels like. Across the street, Helen Brooks sat in her small living room, TV flickering in the dim light. The news anchor spoke, "Breaking update, local authorities confirm that missing veteran Earl Thompson is alive. Case officially closed." Helen smiled faintly. "You did it, Earl." Quiet and clean. She opened a drawer and pulled out an old envelope, faded handwriting on the front. "For Helen. Open when they scream." Inside was a black and white photo, the sold sign standing in the rain. On the back, a line written in dark ink. "They'll see it, and they'll hear me. Not my voice, but the echo." Helen set the picture down, sighed, and whispered, "They heard you, old soldier. Loud and clear." Outside, wind howled through the street, carrying faint echoes of Ryan's cry, splintered raw, dissolving into the storm. Nancy once said, "You can't teach people love, Earl, but you can show them loss." She was right. Some lessons can't be spoken, only demonstrated through absence. I never wanted them to suffer, only to wake up. Sometimes disappearing is the loudest way to speak. That night, Ryan sat alone in his car, hands shaking, as he held my photograph. Streetlight glared across his rain-soaked face, pale, hollow, broken. In his head, the officer's words kept replaying. "Your father's been seen alive in Idaho." The wind rose, rattling the windshield, and for a fleeting second, he thought he heard a whisper carried through the storm. "I told you, son, I see." Ryan screamed again, head dropping against the steering wheel. The horn blared long and mournful, fading into thunder. Outside, the broken sold sign lay face down in the mud, reflecting the flash of lightning, white, sharp, and final. Some wars end without a shot. Mine ended with silence and a scream. January 2024. Oregon's winter came late that year. Snow drifted softly over rooftops, melting the moment it touched the ground. Inside Salem's corner cafe, people gathered over steaming mugs, whispering about the front-page headline of "The Oregon Daily Veteran Donates Home to Foundation for Homeless Soldiers." The photo beneath this title showed an old man, gray-haired, bearded, wearing a worn jacket, shaking hands with a representative from the Homes for Veterans Foundation. Behind them stood a familiar house, the old Thompson residence, now bearing a new wooden sign, Community Shelter Number 12. The caption read, "Mr. Earl Thompson, retired U.S. Army mechanic, previously presumed dead, re-emerged last month to complete the donation of his home. His quiet act of generosity has inspired the local community." By noon, the story had caught fire. Social feeds filled with comments. "He gave up everything for others. A true soldier." Imagine your own son trying to take your house. Karma hits hard. That's what real dignity looks like. Within hours, hundreds shared it. Missing veteran became heroic father. And another name began to circulate beneath the headlines, Ryan Thompson, now paired with a single word, greed. Ryan sat alone in a small Portland apartment. His phone buzzed nonstop, former colleagues, classmates, reporters, all asking the same thing. "Is it true?" He tossed the phone onto the couch, pressed both hands to his head. On the TV, the news replayed his father shaking hands, smiling with calm, almost luminous peace. "He's alive," Ryan whispered, "and he's winning." The anchor's voice rolled on. Mr. Thompson declined to comment on his family but stated, "This house never truly belonged to me. I was only keeping it for whoever needed it next." Each word sliced clean through him. He turned the TV off, stood in the quiet apartment boxes, stacked against bare walls, leftovers of what once filled their old home. Meaningless things. Just noise now. The door opened. Lena stepped in pale raincoat, dripping. She set the keys on the table, silent. "Where were you?" Ryan asked hoarse. "At my sister's." Silence. The clock ticked steady, cruel. "So it's true," she whispered. "You saw the news. You said it was just paperwork." It was. Ryan snapped. He was gone. "The police, the death report. You forged it." "Ryan." Lena cut in, trembling. "We both did. And now everyone knows." He took a step toward her. "I did it for us." "No," she said quietly, backing away. "You did it for yourself." She picked up her bag, zipped it. "I can't stay in this mess anymore." "Lena, please." At the door, she turned, eyes wet but steady. "You lost him because of pride. Now you've lost me because of guilt." The door closed softly. Her footsteps faded down the hall, merging with the sound of snow turning to rain. Ryan sank to the floor. On the phone screen, his father's picture still glowed, that gentle smile, those calm, forgiving eyes. A look Ryan hadn't seen in years. "You wanted peace, huh?" he whispered. "You got it." A bitter laugh cracked his throat, then broke into sobs. "And you left me in hell." "I never sought revenge. I only did what should have been done to give that house to those who truly needed a home. I once read that when a soldier loses his brothers, the only thing he can do is build shelter for the next to survive. Maybe that's why I never quit being a mechanic. I've always known how to fix things. Only this time what I fixed was my own life." That evening, the local station broadcast the dedication ceremony live. Earl Thompson stood on a small outdoor stage, snowflakes glinting in the light. He wore a thick coat, hair silver under the banner that read, "A home for every soldier." He spoke into the mic, voice low but clear. "This house was built with my hands. But I realized walls don't make a home. Love does. and love once forgotten must be rebuilt somewhere else. Applause rippled through the crowd. Cameras panned to the front row. Frank Davis and Helen Brooks sat side by side. Helen dabbed her eyes, smiled faintly, and whispered, "He found peace, Nancy." Meanwhile in Portland, Ryan sat in darkness. On the TV, his father bowed to the audience, stage lights haloing the white of his hair, a glow that looked almost holy. Ryan didn't turn the screen off, didn't move. He just watched until the broadcast ended and the station logo faded into black. In that blackness, his reflection flickered, a man still breathing, but buried alive beneath his own mistakes. They call it karma, but it isn't magic. It's just life circling back the way it always does. You reap what you plant, and sooner or later, truth always returns. It doesn't shout. It doesn't knock. It simply arrives. Nancy once asked me, Earl, if they ever realized what they did. Would you forgive them? I told her. Forgiveness isn't for them, Nancy. It's for me so I can finally sleep. Morning light broke over Portland. Ryan's inbox chimed. Subject line: termination notice effective immediately. Reason: public controversy affecting corporate image. He read it, said nothing. Just rested his hand on the desk, head bowed, silent for a long time. When he finally looked up, a thin ray of sunlight slipped through the blinds, falling across yesterday's newspaper. Front page photo, his father smiling beneath the headline, "Sometimes the best revenge is peace." He stared at it until the letters blurred. That afternoon, he walked through a city park. Children played under the weak sun. A few old veterans sat on benches, hands wrapped around paper cups of coffee. Near the fountain, a small group of volunteers stood by a donation booth. The sign read, "Homes for Veterans Foundation." Ryan stopped, looked at the logo, a house beneath a soaring eagle. A young woman behind the booth smiled. "Would you like to donate, sir?" He hesitated, then pulled out his wallet, placed a crumpled 20 in the box. "For my father," he said softly. The girl blinked. "Is he one of us?" Ryan smiled faintly. "He's better." He turned and walked away, his figure folding into the crowd, smaller, fainter, until it seemed he too was disappearing. Not because someone erased him, but because the truth had already taken his place. I don't know if Ryan understands yet, but I hope someday, when the wind is quiet enough, he'll hear what I meant the day I left. Peace isn't the absence of noise, son. It's the sound of finally letting go. And I've heard that sound now. Spring 2024, Payette Lake, Idaho. The water lay dark green and still mirroring snow-capped mountains as they melted into mist. A small pine wood cabin sat tucked between the trees, its roof soft with moss, a thin thread of smoke rising from the chimney like an old man's breath. Earl Thompson, 68, rocked gently on the porch chair. Morning light filtered through branches, warming the weathered lines of his face. On the table rested a wooden model, a tiny army jeep, olive-painted bolts carved in perfect scale. Beside him stood 3 children from town, Matt, 10, and the Hanson twins, their eyes bright with curiosity. Like this, Earl said, guiding Matt's hand. "You hold steady. Don't rush the corners. If you carve too deep, you break the frame." Matt looked up. "Did you really fight in a war?" Earl's smile reached only halfway, gentle but deep. "No, son. Not anymore." The kids giggled. One of the girls asked, "So what do you fight now?" Earl paused, then said softly, "Just memories." When they ran off, laughter fading down the trail, he swept the wood dust into a small tin box. Inside the cabin, the walls held a collage of quieter years. Nancy in her youth, brown-haired and laughing by the shore. Their wedding photo, black and white and fading. and one of him in uniform beside a transport plane, half smiling, caught between two worlds. On the desk lay a new envelope stamped from Salem, from Helen Brooks. Earl opened it carefully. Earl, I saw the news. You did what Nancy would have wanted. Some wars are meant to end in silence, and I'm glad you listened that night. They finally understand. You can rest now, Helen. He folded the letter, placed it beside Nancy's picture. She always knew you'd still be watching, Helen. Outside, wind skimmed the lake, carrying a cool mist. Clouds drifted apart like smoke from a dying match. That night he unlocked the small safe in the corner, the one he had carried from Salem. The old metal key, Nancy's last keepsake, still hung inside his jacket. He slid it into the lock. A dry click. The door creaked open. Inside, no cash, no papers, only a single yellowed envelope. On it, in Nancy's looping handwriting, for Earl, open when you're ready. He sat down, hands trembling as he tore the edge. The faint scent of her perfume rose with the paper. Earl, if you're reading this, the world has already taken something from you. And I know you'll try to fix it. But some things, love, aren't broken. They're just done. Forgive when you're ready, not before. Don't let pain be your last companion. Nancy. Earl closed his eyes. His breath slowed steady and deep. Fingers brushed her signature as if tracing the outline of her hand across time. I wasn't ready, Nancy, he whispered, but I'm close. When I was a soldier, I thought war ended when the guns went silent. Now I know it ends only when the hate does. Each morning by this lake, I hear wind through the pines, water tapping against the boat hull, and I realize I'm not hiding. I'm learning how to live again. The next morning, the town stirred early. A group of school children arrived at his cabin, arms full of flowers and painted signs. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Earl blinked, surprised. Their teacher smiled. The kids read about your story in the paper. They wanted to thank you for the donation. He chuckled quietly. When they took a photo together, a boy raised a thumbs up and shouted, "You're a hero, sir!" Earl shook his head. Heroes don't disappear, son. They just change where they stand. Meanwhile, back in Portland, Ryan sat alone in a near-empty cafe, eyes on the small TV above the counter. A local segment aired veteran crafts toys for kids by the lake. The camera caught Earl smiling as children crowded around the workbench. Sunlight gleamed across his eyes, clear, unburdened, free. Ryan froze. The coffee in his hand had gone cold. He set the cup down, staring at the screen. The reporter's voice said, he declined interviews, stating only, "I've said enough in my life. It's time to listen." A tear slipped down Ryan's wrist. Not from anger, not even regret, but from understanding at last. You weren't trying to punish me, he whispered. You were teaching me. When we grow old, we no longer need apologies. We just hope they understand once. And if they do, the wounds heal themselves. Nancy once told me peace doesn't come from what you build, Earl. It comes from what you can walk away from. Now I believe her. I spent a lifetime building things, and then I learned to walk away, leaving everything behind but love itself. That evening, sunset turned the lake to gold. Earl stood on the porch, watching the children skip stones. Their laughter echoed across the water, bright and weightless. He smiled and whispered to the wind, "That's the sound I missed, Nancy." Inside, her letter still rested on the table beside their wedding photo and the unfinished Jeep model. The last light poured through the window, painting everything in a soft amber glow, the color of forgiveness. I used to think life was a chain of battles without end. But some wars exist only to teach us how to lay down our weapons. And when you can do that, it isn't defeat. It's peace earned while you're still alive. On the screen back in Portland, Ryan's reflection blurred with his father's image. His eyes were still wet, but softer now. "You didn't disappear, Dad," he murmured. "You just went where peace could find you." November 2025. Morning in Portland was cold and pale fog drifting low over the Willamette River. Inside a small repair shop on the city's edge, the hum of engines blended with a soft radio voice announcing the coming Thanksgiving weekend. Ryan Thompson, 39, wiped grease from his hands after tightening the brakes on an old pickup. He looked around the shop, simple, quiet, honest work. Not much money, but for the first time in years, he slept well. As he packed his tools, a delivery man knocked, placing a sealed wooden box on the counter. The label read, "From Frank Davis, Boise, Idaho." Ryan frowned. He opened the box. Inside was a small wooden army jeep, olive green, finely carved, exactly like the ones his father had taught the kids in Idaho to build last year. Under the doorframe, a tiny inscription burned into the wood. "A good mechanic checks the engine twice and his heart once." Ryan's hand trembled. The scent of oak and machine oil filled the room, pulling him back to the old garage in Salem, the smell of his father's world. Inside the box was a folded note handwritten by Frank Davis. He finished this before winter came. He said, "Send it when the boy's ready to listen." I think that time is now. Ryan stood still. Light filtered through the dusty window, touching the Jeep and making it glow. A tear slid down. Landing on the tiny wooden wheel, he laughed softly through it, whispering, "You were still teaching, even when you were gone." Some think disappearing is running away, but sometimes it's the only way to make others finally look inward. I didn't leave out of anger. I left so they'd understand some things can't be taken by apology. They can only be understood through loss. Silence isn't escape. It's the lesson that stays when words can't reach anymore. Idaho, November 2025. The sky was pale gray snowflakes scattered across Payette Lake. The small wooden cabin glowed softly in the forest. Earl stood on the bridge he'd built from pine logs, stretching out over the water, the same bridge where he taught kids to carve toys and fish in the spring. Wind stirred his coat, lifting the edges like old flags in a forgotten parade. He hung a new wooden sign on the railing, letters carved by hand, "Freedom earned, not given." He stepped back, studying it. Beneath the sign sat a small, unfinished Jeep, the very first model left unpainted. A reminder that every journey stays half open until someone else continues it. Nancy once told him, "Someday, Earl, you'll stop fixing machines and start fixing hearts." Maybe today was that day. I fought once for honor, he thought, then for family. But in the end, just to understand that victory means being quiet without feeling empty. Portland, late afternoon. Ryan drove along the Willamette, the Jeep wrapped in a wool scarf beside him. He parked by an old bridge, the one where he and his father used to fish when he was a boy. The river moved slow beneath its surface, shining like glass under the crimson sky. He stood there, hands in his pockets, breathing the damp November air. "You built everything with your hands, Dad, but you rebuilt me with your silence." He pulled a small pocket knife from his coat, carved a few words into a thin piece of wood. "Forgiven. Not forgotten." Then set it on the railing, let the wind take it. The fragment floated gently down, drifting west along the current toward Idaho. We all build bridges, some to cross, some to burn, and a few to remember. Nancy always believed that love finds its way back eventually. Maybe she was right. Evening, Payette Lake. The sunset spilled gold across the water. Earl sat on the porch, steam rising from his cup of tea. On the table beside him, Nancy's framed photo and 2 wooden jeeps, one complete, one unfinished. Light fell across them both, turning the room the color of forgiveness. He smiled softly, speaking into the wind. "We're good now, Nancy." They finally see. Outside, the wooden sign creaked gently in the wind, freedom earned, not given. The sound was rhythmic, steady like an old clock, marking the moment peace finally arrived. Sometimes the strongest answers don't need words, just enough silence for someone else to hear themselves again. I never left them behind. I just went far enough so they could find their way back. If anyone ever asks what victory really means, I'd say this: it's when your heart no longer needs to be understood to feel at peace. Some stories don't end with the door closing. They end with the sound of someone finally breathing again. Earl found peace by letting go. Ryan found it by listening. And maybe that's the bridge all of us are trying to build between who we were and who we can still become. If this story reached a quiet place in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it so someone out there, someone holding on too tight, can remember that silence isn't the end. It's the beginning of healing. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is peace. If this story touched you, share it. Leave a comment with where you're watching from. And remember, every quiet victory deserves to be heard.